Affinity Bias. Imagine walking into a room and spotting someone from your hometown or who loves the same weird pizza topping you do. You instantly feel a little spark, a connection. That's affinity bias. In your brain, there's a tiny cheerleader for everything familiar and comfy, which makes you nod along with people who share your likes, your background, or even your mannerisms. But here's the catch. When you're deciding who to hire, promote, or befriend, that cheerleader shouldn't make the call, because by doing that, you might overlook a sea of talent and diversity that doesn't look or sound like you, but is equally remarkable. Confirmation bias. Imagine you have a puzzle and you're convinced that the piece in your hand fits in a certain spot. You might try to push it in, ignoring all the other pieces scattered around. That's confirmation bias. It's when our brains, acting like overeager salespeople, try to make reality fit our preconceptions, instead of noticing how things really are. We seek out information that agrees with us and ignore what doesn't. When we make decisions, especially important ones, it's like we're only listening to half the story. We need to remember to hear the whole story, even the parts that might not be our favorites. Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love. Gender bias. Imagine a world where everyone flips a coin to make big decisions. Heads, the men win. Tails, the women lose. Sounds unfair, right? That's gender bias. It's an ancient script that's been playing in the background of our minds, telling us that certain jobs, behaviors, and roles are meant for men or women. But here's the twist. The coin is rigged. Often without realizing it, we flip it in a way that keeps landing on heads. It's about time we throw out the coin and let people's real talents and abilities tell us who they are, not their gender. Ageism. Picture a tree. Young saplings are flexible but fragile. Ancient trees are sturdy but rigid. That's how we often see age. Ageism is like walking through a forest and only valuing a certain kind of tree. It's a sneaky voice whispering that someone's too young for responsibility or too old for innovation. But here's the thing. The forest thrives because it has all kinds of trees, each with their own strengths. A workplace, a community, a world is richer when it doesn't use the number of rings in a tree's trunk to measure its worth. Name bias. Names are like the covers of our life's book. But what if people judge the story by the cover alone? Name bias is when our brains, acting like lazy librarians, make assumptions about a whole person just from their name. Maybe it's hard to pronounce, or it sounds foreign, or it just doesn't feel familiar. This bias can lead someone to stack the books without giving some the fair chance to be read. It's important to remember that every name has a story behind it, and every story deserves to be told and heard. Beauty bias. Imagine a world where mirrors have magical powers, reflecting not just faces but futures. In this world, being good-looking gives you a golden ticket, better jobs, kinder judgments, more opportunities. This is beauty bias, where the symmetry of your features or the style of your clothes can open doors that should be opened by merit. It's an age-old tale where we subconsciously cast the handsome hero and the beautiful damsel in the leading roles. But here's the twist. Real life isn't a fairy tale, and real talent doesn't always come in a pretty package. It's crucial to look beyond the mirror, to listen to the stories and see the skills that reside beneath the surface. Halo effect. Picture a person with a glowing halo, bright and shining. Everything they do is touched by that light, and so in our eyes, they can do no wrong. This is the halo effect at play, where one sparkling quality outshines the rest, blinding us to any faults or flaws. We start to see the person not as they are, but as we believe them to be. Perfect, infallible. It's like having a favorite character in a book. Their virtues become the whole story, but characters are complex and so are people. We need to flip the pages, look behind the halo, and appreciate the full story, shadows and all. Horn effect. Now imagine the opposite. A person with not a halo but horns. One mistake, one flaw, and that's all we see. They're typecast as the villain in our minds. This horn effect means we're quick to judge, to label someone as bad news based on a single trait or error. It's like reading a book and deciding it's terrible after one typo. We forget that people, like books, are more than one word or one chapter. They are a complex compilation of many qualities, and they deserve the chance to be read in full. Status quo bias. Picture a well-worn path through a forest, comfortable and familiar. That's the status quo, the way things are and have always been. The status quo bias is our internal compass, pointing us down that same path, even when there might be a better route. It's the comfort of the known versus the fear of the unknown, the safety of predictability against the risk of change. But sometimes, the forest changes, and the old paths don't lead to the best destinations anymore. We need to be brave explorers, willing to forge new trails to reach places where the old paths can't take us. Conformity bias. Imagine standing in a crowd where everyone starts clapping. You don't know why, but you clap too. That's conformity bias, the social echo that nudges us to fit in rather than stand out. It's a powerful force, the desire to be part of the group, to sing in chorus and march in step. But if everyone's clapping and no one knows why, we might be applauding something we don't believe in. It takes courage to stop clapping, to ask why, to listen to your own music, because sometimes the most beautiful harmonies are born from different notes coming together, not the same note played over and over. Implicit association bias. Imagine your mind as a vast, bustling city, with thoughts and feelings crisscrossing like traffic on the streets. Implicit association bias is like the city's invisible shortcuts, the alleys and side roads we zip through without even noticing. These shortcuts connect things in our minds, like associating certain qualities with certain social groups, without us consciously deciding to do so. Maybe we link leadership with men or nurturing with women without meaning to. It's like an autopilot based on societal maps we've been handed since birth. But autopilots can steer us wrong. It's essential to grab the wheel, to challenge these automatic associations and navigate our thoughts and actions with intention and awareness. Attribution bias. Imagine you're at a play, and every actor's mistake is spotlighted while their triumphs happen in the shadows. This is attribution bias, where we're the director and the audience, and we often judge others' performances unfairly. When someone else slips up, we blame their character, their talent. But when the mistake is ours, we blame the stage, the script, anything but ourselves. This double standard in our mental theatre makes us critics of others and fans of ourselves, and it's not a fair show. To be just, we need to shine the light evenly, understanding the scenes and acts of others with the same kindness we apply to our own. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. Picture a singer belting out a tune, off-key but blissfully unaware, thinking they're the next big star. That's the Dunning-Kruger Effect in a nutshell. It's when our confidence is a skyscraper, but our skills are still laying the foundation. This mismatch can happen to anyone. We might be novices, but our lack of knowledge masks the complexity of what we don't know. As we learn and build our skills, we begin to see the vast landscape of what mastery really looks like. The key is to keep learning, keep building, and to be humble enough to recognize the difference between our perception of our abilities and their actual scope. In-group bias. In-group bias is a psychological phenomenon that nudges us towards favoring people who are part of the same group as ourselves. This group can be defined by any number of characteristics: ethnicity, nationality, profession, religion, or even favorite sports teams. Consider this: each of us is like an island in a vast archipelago, with our own customs, culture, and identity. The sea around us represents the differences between us and others. In-group bias is the bridge we naturally build to those nearest us, those who share our island's characteristics. It's a survival mechanism, honed over millennia, to foster trust and cooperation among those we perceive to be like us. This bias can be observed everywhere, from classrooms where cliques form based on shared interests, to workplaces where colleagues bond over a common professional background. It's in the way we might cheer louder for our country's athletes during the Olympics, or how we rally behind someone from our hometown when they achieve success on a global stage. But here's the rub. While in-group bias can create a powerful sense of belonging and community, it can also lead to exclusion, prejudice, and discrimination. It can make us blind to the virtues of the out-group and overly forgiving of the faults within our own group. This can perpetuate social divides, reinforcing echo chambers where we only hear echoes of our own voice and not the diverse chorus of humanity. To counteract in-group bias, we must make a conscious effort to build more bridges to other islands, to stretch the bonds of empathy and understanding across wider seas. This entails recognizing the common humanity in all people, regardless of whether they share our immediate identifiers. We must learn to appreciate the richness that comes from different perspectives and life experiences. Initiatives like cultural exchanges, inclusive teamwork practices, and community events that bring diverse groups together can help. Education plays a crucial role too, teaching us to value diversity and to think critically about our own biases. Personal relationships with members of outgroups are especially powerful. They turn abstract concepts into concrete realities, and they humanize the other, making it harder to maintain the walls of bias. In-group bias is not inherently evil, it is a natural part of who we are. But in a world that is increasingly connected and interdependent, our challenge is to expand the definition of our in-group to include all of humanity. By doing so, we can tap into the full potential of our collective intelligence and compassion, creating a more just and cohesive society. It's about transforming the archipelago of human experience into a single, interconnected continent of shared destiny and mutual respect. Cultural bias. Imagine a vast tapestry of human experience, each culture a unique thread with its own color and texture. Cultural bias is the tendency to view the world through the narrow lens of one's own culture, missing the vibrant array of patterns created by others. It's like having a favorite color and painting everything with it, not realizing that the true beauty lies in the diversity of the palette. Cultural bias manifests when we instinctively favor traditions, ideas, or expressions that align with our cultural background, while undervaluing or misunderstanding those from cultures different from our own. It's rooted in the comfort of the familiar, the rhythm of the language we grew up with, the flavors of the food that remind us of home, and the shared customs that bind us to our community. But here's where the insight deepens. Our world is a dynamic, interwoven community of cultures, each one contributing unique insights, wisdom, and perspectives. When we let cultural bias steer our interactions, we risk closing the door to this vast library of human knowledge. We may inadvertently perpetuate stereotypes, create divisions, and stifle the synergistic potential that arises from cultural exchange. To overcome cultural bias, we must first recognize that every culture has its own legacy of storytelling, problem-solving, and innovation. We should approach cultural differences not as barriers, but as bridges to unexplored territories. By actively seeking to understand and appreciate the cultural contexts of others, we can expand our cognitive maps, enrich our experiences, and foster an environment where all cultures are celebrated for the richness they bring to the human experience. Imagine walking into a room filled with music from every corner of the world. Each melody carries the stories and the soul of a culture. Cultural bias would have us reach for the volume knob of only the familiar tunes. But if we resist that impulse and instead let the symphony of cultures play, we experience the full concert of humanity in harmony. We can dance to new rhythms, learn new songs, and in doing so discover that our own culture is but one beautiful note in an endless opus. By embracing cultural diversity, we unlock the true potential of our collective human creativity. We foster a more empathetic, collaborative, and innovative society. Overcoming cultural bias doesn't mean abandoning our heritage. Rather, it means honoring our traditions, while also celebrating the diversity that surrounds us. It's about making the tapestry of humanity even more intricate, colorful, and connected, a masterpiece we all can share.